exactly what we're after this morning, but it'll work. A little largemouth. What we're doing is fishing shallow water basin lake in northern Wisconsin. The deepest part on this lake is about 14 feet, 15 feet. And it kind of chokes out with weeds throughout the summer. So coming out, we're targeting 5 to 6 feet of water, where the cabbage is just starting to come up, the red cabbage. And you get a little bit farther out from that weed that's almost to the point where you can't even fish it, it's so thick. And that's where we've been finding most of the fish this morning, out in, like I said, 5 to 6 feet. I'm just dragging small bait rigs panfish cobra jig, tip of the Berkeley Gulp Alive 1-inch minnow. One of my favorites. I've been using these for quite a few years. Everyone knows I love them. Favorite go-to bait for crappies, bluegills, all kinds of panfish. Getting some dandy bluegills this morning already. Dad just reeled in one crappie, a couple small crappies. Been getting a lot bigger than this. Got a little guy, I'm gonna let that one go. Let's see if I can't get a bigger one. Crappie. Nice crappie too. Look at that. That's actually what we came here for this morning. To load up on some crappies for the dinner tonight. Maybe even a little late breakfast action. To give you an idea of the setup that I'm using to fish in the 4 to 5 to 6 feet of water is it's quite simple. Got a nice medium action spinning rod, a 6-pound test. A lot of guys like to use a little bit heavier line. I don't. I like a little bit thinner line. If you can get down to 6-pound test, you're going to be good to be able to hoist a pretty good sized crappie into the boat. And then just a small weighted bobber. Your thing that you got to keep in mind when you're fishing this kind of vegetation. These weeds are literally 6 inches from the surface here. Mainly, they would be up to the top right now, but we've had so much rain over the course of the summer that they're down a little bit. So we're in 5 feet, and I've got about 2.5, almost 3 feet of line out from my jig to my bobber. I don't want to have 5 feet out, obviously, because then the jig's going to be down on the bottom, and I don't want to have 1.5 foot out, because then you're going to be mainly targeting crappies. A lot of times crappies will come up to eat it. You're going to get down to where the bluegills are and the crappies. If you put down 2 to 3 feet, don't quite split the water column, go a little bit deeper than that, and you'll get into the fish. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and if you're going to, let's say, a small lake that you've never fished before, I've actually just pulled out my Navionics app on my cell phone. You can see that's where we're at. The little red arrow is us. So you can see this red triangle, that's where we are today. We're right on the outside edge of the 5-foot break. We're in about 6.5 feet. And you can see this second contour line, which is your 10-foot break. This whole thing, now that we're here and we see it, is all full of cabbage, all the way almost out to the 10-foot break. Most of the fish, like I said earlier, are going to be, we've been finding them anyway, staged up in about 5.5 to 6 feet. You can see out to 10 to 15 feet. Where I'm going to start is on the edge of this blue line in 5, and then work my way out. Find the red cabbage, find the thick green cabbage, but not the stuff that's so thick you can't get a bobber and a jig through it. You got to locate the stuff that's got a little bit of water in between the weed bed. Those fish seem to attract to that. They're stuck in there. There's a lot of feed. There's a lot of insects for them throughout the summer. This technique works great all the way from after the spawning period in the spring. So we're talking end of May, June, all the way through September. The fish are going to hold in these type of patterns. Think not too shallow weeds, but in the middle. So you don't want to be fishing the really deep stuff. You want to be targeting the 7 to 4 feet of water for these panfish. Start in the center. Want to do, like I said, just work your way around, cast, make sure you fan cast, do a lot of fan casting until you find the fish, get on them, and catch the fish. And using the Navionics app, you can really key in on those shallow water areas, and it just saves a lot more time finding those weed beds to catch those bluegills and crappies like we're doing today. I got one more tip I'd like to share with you on the Gulp Alive stuff. Like I said, I've been using Gulp Alive minnows for a very long time, and I love this stuff. It's all I use. I very rarely ever use live bait unless I'm fishing walleyes. What I like to do, see, I've actually got quite a few of these 1-inch minnows sitting on the deck. A lot of times these 1-inch minnows are going to come and they're going to be pretty soft. So I'll take 4 or 5 of them out of the jar and set them on the deck, especially if it's a nice sunny day. And what that's going to do is it's going to dry them out a little bit, give them a little bit more tackiness, hardens them up, and ensures that when they're a little bit harder, that's going to stay on the hook longer. You're going to catch a lot more fish on before it comes off. If you don't do that, they're a little soft. You're going to catch a few fish on each one before you lose, especially if you got these little bluegills pecking at you and pulling them off all the time. But just take them out, dry a few out. If you don't end up using them at the end of the day, stick them back in the jar. They soak up the liquid again, and they're back to pretty much as good as new. So another quick little tip to help you hopefully catch a lot more fish on one tail versus using half a jar.
Decent crappie. Nice fish. What I'm doing here, take a look at that jig. That's a Kender's tungsten feather jig, and it's a little bit bigger than most people use for crappies up here. The reason I'm doing that, there's a lot of bluegills in this lake, really big ones, and I also have a 2-inch minnow grub on it. That's a Berkeley product. It's Gulp Alive, and over the last few years we've started using these a lot for panfish. Even though they look big, they're not. What it does is it pretty much stops all the little 6s and 7s and bluegills from taking the jig. They'll just peck at it, and if you set the hook and catch a fish, about 8 out of 9 times it's one that's worth keeping. And I've already caught a couple of bluegills in the 9-inch range on this morning, probably 4 or 5. I'm going to continue to throw this big jig and try to attract the largest of the panfish in the area. Get some.